Well, I I felt that changes had to be made in terms of our education. We wanted uh, programs that were relevant to our lives, such as ethnic studies programs, and as a result of that, um, students who felt similarly in terms of African American, Native American, Asian American, Chicano Latino students, and white students who were also interested in ethnic studies got together to demand ethnic studies courses from the university. And then the university was, was resistant to this. We attempted to negotiate and talk over the table, but eventually the discussions broke down, and we had to resort to a student strike. The feelings were very positive. The different groups met, and we actually went to each other's meetings. There was the African American Students Union. Actually, it was called the Afro American Students Union. They had a mass meeting with about 400 to 500 people. Very uplifting, very positive about making change at UC Berkeley campus. I went to the Asian American Political Alliance Association meeting, and similarly very uplifting. So it was very positive about together, all these different peoples of color with white supporters would embark on this task to change the university. Yeah. So it's very, very positive in the beginning. I guess as the strike went on, it did tire people out, and things weren't always on a high level. It was kind of up and down. Yeah. Well, we didn't really have a whole lot of resources on campus, but what we did have was ourselves. We communicated with each other. We did have support of the teaching assistants. These are graduate students, like the two that we have here. And the graduate students wanted changes in the university system themselves too, because this was their future also. So we had broad-based support from the graduate students on the picket lines. And as far as the tenured faculty professor, they tend to be more involved in their own research and their own departments, and they didn't really come out fully in favor of this idea of ethnic studies until towards the end of the strike. Okay, when the movement was getting really big, where you had like 5,000 people coming out to rallies and marches and so forth. It was only towards that end where the tenured faculty came out in full support. I think there was a vote, something like 400 in favor of the formation of ethnic studies versus a handful opposed. This is in terms of the academic senate, which is a very powerful but slow-moving institution on campus. Yeah. The governor was Ronald Reagan at that time, and he definitely wanted to suppress the strike. He saw this as, this is a big threat. Ethnic studies, what are they going to do? It's a threat to the university. It's a threat to the university, threat to the state of California, and he actually called out the National Guard to suppress the strike. So towards the latter, the midpoint of the strike, there were actually 2,000 National Guard. Many of them camped out at your Berkeley Marina out here. They had tents and tanks. And then at the Alameda, they had a naval air station. And there were National Guard troops stationed there, and it's all because students, young people, wanted to have some say in the future of their education. They saw that as being a threat, in terms of information, knowledge, and changing of education. They saw that as a big threat. But you could say that the movement did eventually prevail, in terms of making these changes. But it took a lot of struggle and solidarity. Well, in the beginning, how the strike progressed was there was peaceful picketing, information picketing, where we would march on campus in front of Donnell Hall, which was actually one of the main buildings on campus where undergrads take their classes. And so we had informational picketing, and then later we escalated the strike activities to a stationary picket line that sealed off Sather Gate, which is where the bridge is that goes onto the main part of campus. And at that point, the Alameda County Sheriffs and the UC police attacked the picket lines, and then it began escalating, and the situation began to get polarized. And then more police were brought onto campus, but each phase of repression on the students and the strikers and their supporters resulted in the gathering of more support. Yeah, so it didn't really scare people a whole lot. In fact, it made people a little bit more angrier, because a lot of times people didn't even know what the issues were. I'm just going to class, but then they see students getting beaten up or tear gas being thrown, and then they want to find out what the issues are, and then it got bigger. All of a sudden, police brutality became a very big issue. There was one fellow striker. His name was Cordell Abercrombie, African American student. He did a lot of tutoring and volunteer teaching in Pittsburgh, California, and he was one of the strike captains, and he was actually grabbed by the police when he was walking on campus by himself, and he was beaten and slapped a lot, and he got black eyes and all this stuff, and they tried to scare him to not come out to the picket line, but he still came out, and he talked about what happened to him at a student convocation the next day, and then people were very emotional about that, because they felt that they didn't want to let incidents like this scare them. Okay, so the strike even got bigger when stories like that came out. So it was a very powerful message, but it did take getting broad-based support, and it did take persistence, and eventually we were able to get something going as far as negotiations. Yeah, so I guess you could say first it was negotiations, opposition from the administration, and then strike activities, and then maybe renegotiations. Yeah. Well, we always had to kind of watch out.
Did you have to live in fear through the strike?
Well, we were sometimes when we had meetings, we would be concerned about some type of reprisal, happening and all this stuff. But I think the attitude that we had was, we were always doing everything, above board, and that if we did get arrested or any of us got arrested, we would raise bail monies. We had like a
Fundraisers.
Yeah, we had fundraisers and we raised bail money, and then we also had support from the law school students. So there were law students that would be legal observers, so they would be like witnesses and things like this. And I think at one rally, after a lot of people got arrested, we would have people pass out cans and people would put dollar bills in there, and then that would be used for bail money. And we also made sure that everybody was bailed out and no one was left languishing in jail, including not just people of color but also white students. So it kind of made it more like, this is a community that we want to build to. Yeah, is that the bell?
Oh, no, you're good.
Oh yeah.
Well, actually, in the beginning, I didn't really consider political activism and things like this and community work. So in the beginning, actually, I was in the Army ROTC program, and I was planning to go through ROTC and go into the military, and then just have a career more like in business or something like that. But when I went to UC Berkeley, a lot of things opened my eyes as far as what was going on in the community. I was involved in anti-war movement. The Black Panthers movement was very powerful movement in the Bay Area. I started attending some of their rallies, and when there was a report that the Black Panther office would be raided by the police and shot up and stuff, a lot of us students went over to their office and we did our homework there to kind of have more support for the Black Panthers and stuff like that. So I did that when I was an undergrad too. So when and then I went to anti-war marches and things like that. So by the time the strike happened, I kind of had that kind of a background in terms of wanting to change the world and make a difference in it. So after the strike, I actually did a lot of community work. I was involved in the struggle to save the International Hotel in San Francisco, Manila town, and I was there for like 9 years. And so after that, it was only maybe, over 20 some odd years after that I decided to go be a professor in ethnic studies. Yeah, but more in terms of that, I feel that the history is important to transfer and transmit to other people, and to put it into writing and things like that. Yeah, I would say the biggest regret would be that we didn't figure out some way to sustain long-term solidarity with each other, and people just went their own different paths. It's almost like you finish school, people go back to their communities, or they go to other communities, but then there was a lot of solidarity that was built during that strike, and we didn't keep that part together. One of my friends, Manuel Delgado, who is head of the one of the leaders of the Mexican American Student Confederation, he said that before the strike, he grew up in a Mexican American community in San Bernardino area, and he didn't know too much about other peoples of color. He just knew about Mexican Americans, and he knew that there was an Asian family that ran a grocery store, but he didn't know too much about them. His mom just said that, oh, don't go over there, don't hang around with them because Chinese eat babies or something like that. It's more like a joke type thing. But he said, but in the strike itself, he learned that Asians and Latinos, Native Americans, and peoples of color, African Americans, actually have exactly the same needs, the same aspirations, the same desires to change and improve society. He learned all that, and he said, but then he said after the strike, he noticed that people went to their own separate communities again, and then he kind of missed that connection, you know. So there was, you could say, the solidarity building is also a cultural thing too, where people actually learn about each other's culture and they create like a new culture, you know.